What's up guys, the Strong Boys 19 here, and welcome to the beginning of my reviews on Metallica's discography, starting from the debut album all the way up to Hardwired to Self-Destruct, before I will get my proper chance of doing a review on their brand new studio album 72 Seasons, which will be coming to the channel as soon as when the album will be dropped eventually. So, with that being said, I'm going to start the reviews off with the debut album entitled Kill 'Em All. Kill 'Em All was released on July 25th, 1983, and this is the first album to be released for Metallica with the involvement of the classic independent record label of Megaforce Records. The album was originally going to be called Metal Up Your Ass, with a different album cover, but it had to be somewhat controversial because the distribution company didn't like the look of it, nor the idea of the album title, so that's why they've changed to this iconic artwork that we all see and love. And yet alone, I don't understand that, because another band called Slayer released even more graphic, controversial artwork with artworks like South of Heaven and Rain in Blood. This album has aged incredibly well in so many of its musical ability and its own identity. And what could be said about this album without mentioning the involvement of the musicians themselves, not only with Hetfield and Ulrich, but with the others of Kirk Hammett, Cliff Burton, and the former, later on, Metallica musician, Dave Mustaine. So, there are 4 tracks that were actually credited with Dave Mustaine's name before his firing, and these tracks were The Four Horsemen, Jump in the Fire, Phantom Lord, and as well as Metal Melita. The first track on the album, Hit the Lights, a big exploding fade-in with crash cymbals assaulting power on the music's energy that remains all the way through the record. And what a banger this opening track really is. Brilliant opening line of guitar playing, and the speed was fast as lightning. The passion was all the way through confident. Hetfield had written most of the song from his time with his previous band called Leather Charm. When Lars did form Metallica with James, they decided to rewrite the song. This has amazing variety of riffs and soloing while the drums continue the tempo in its tight aggression. One of my favourite tracks to begin the album as well. It is superb banging strength of heavy, awesome stuff from the beginning to the end of the track. The Four Horsemen. This is something quite different from the beginning side because it's more or less like onto a groovy made of writing. Great beat on double bass pedaling, alternate picking, vocally Hetfield sounded brilliant with attitude, and the melody was kicking in beautifully and brilliantly when I hear the chorus. Bass lyrically about the Four Horsemen on the apocalypse, though it did mention on some lines of the lyrics a few religious styles of words. Originally was actually going to be based around teen sexual frustration from what Dave Mustaine wanted to write about, but it was then used with a song called Mechanics with his later on band after his firing from Metallica, that being Megadeth. The song does deliver a really effective hook from the chorus and the bridge section. But what is also brilliant is the difference into the whole writing of it, because Hit the Lights was heavy already, but the Four Horsemen is very different after the exploding beginning of the record. The soloing was also beautifully mixed in this warm and colourful sound, and the control is all there in this musical presence of this song. An excellent number. Motor Breath. This is a song that is actually one of my favourites from this album. Pummeling start onto the drums, opening riffs, bursts in the thrash effectiveness, galloping beats to tempos. It dives into a catchy and powerful source of what this song is really about. This is the big inspiration for Motorhead, as Motorhead have always been one of my favourite bands of all time as well. And a lot of the lyrics are quite different to what you'd think about for Metallica, but in the early stages, they were finding so many new ideas. But this is on a simple factor of lyrics. It's about, living in the fast lane. The quicker, faster speed shown a lot of addictive playing styles and versatility. It's the shortest song of the album, which is over 3 minutes long, but it still grabs a lot of attention with punches and kicks all around this glorious yet mental style in its musicianship. Jump in the Fire. This is another highlight on the album for me. It was written by Mustaine when he was in a band before his firing. Lyrically, it was based around people being damned to hell, hence the line of jumping in the fire, and again, different lyrics before this song came to completion. It was dealing with sex, and like I said, it was written by Mustaine, but this was written when he was in a different band called Panic at the age of 16. Musically is very, very good, and I do like the punky vein into it, but it still is mad and striking, bass and guitars following each other while the continuing rhythmic patterns from the drums do continue along. The lead is fantastic, as it was perfectly clear to hear like the other solos on the album. Anesthesia, Pulling Teeth, this outstanding instrumental. How can you not love the album without talking about this track? This is another highlight on the record. Cliff's distorted bass solo was phenomenal, and this is what made Cliff become one of the best masterminds on the bass, with his own gracious, golden, and massively talented gifts. It's wonderful, and this is what made Metallica be Metallica in a different purpose. Yes, we love Hammett, Ulrich, and Hetfield, and also Mustaine, but Cliff Burton was another brilliant source that made a huge impact later on in Metallica's sound and history. This is an essential, big influential instrumental piece that never still ceases to amaze me. And that beautifully leads up to one of the other classics on the album, Whiplash, after the Pulling Teeth instrumental. Instant classic. It is more or less like on a reflective, nostalgic feel about thrashing around while doing gigs. Best moments on its writing, and the chemistry is what grew the most. Whiplash is another one of my high favourites in the early era of Metallica because it shows the band at one of their best abilities, pull off this powerful adrenaline, and I really do love this one just as much. If not, it's one of the best Metallica songs of all time. Phantom Lord. This opens on a droning slow keyboard synth note on A and then B while the band begins, then returns back to this thrilling form of music. It presents a grunty tone a little bit from the way Hetfield was singing on a few parts. However, the instrumentation remains so consistent at the same time. The instrumental section does change the sound, but I think it did cast a separate and wicked mix. The cleaner tone makes this separate appearance, to me, very progressive from the overall nature of the song's identity. Quite similar to what the other lyrics earlier on the album were, and it's a metaphor of the band's brand of thrash metal. Another really good song, and it's pretty underrated as well, and same goes on to the next track, which is No Remorse. This is just amazing from the start on blistering solos and much more simple, heavy metal, riffing goodness. Lyrics onto the first moments on the war to later on more vivid imagery on fighting, going to war, killing with no remorse. It's super punchy. The stop-start actions were brilliantly played. I would personally like better with more listens. Probably my least favourite, but there's not a lot of flaws surrounding this album. while I think No Remorse is not as perfect as a lot of the songs are that I love, but at the same time, it is, like with Phantom Lord, super underrated. But the ultimate song on the album, in my opinion, is Seek and Destroy. This is the masterpiece across this album. What I adore the most about this song is the form of memorable riffs to stellar choruses. The band were all on fire from the start to the finish. It's an essential moment in Metallica's repertoire that would later on become one of the biggest hits they've ever made, one of the best things they've ever written. Lyrics onto the track is all about looking for a fight, the edge of destruction to destroy, the urge to kill, and the menacing touch of the music completes and matches the form on those lyrics from the way they were expressed. I do love this one. Seek and Destroy is, to me, my favourite song on this album. Then the album finishes with Metal Metallica. The distorting guitars sounded filthy and crunchy. Then the band explodes into their fastest tempo yet to conclude the album. Various lyrics on running for safety, to chaos and destructive style, visionary words. And this is pretty much all around this exploding domination to finish the album in this way, because it's still mad all these years later to think about this track as, something that finishes with a bang, Early roots for Metallica to find their sound, and this is very strong after all of this amazing musical ability and strengths that this album does continue to deliver and grow a huge influence for many of us later on. The production is also really good, and it's probably as well one of the rawest. And yet alone that there are other metal debuts that have that rawness, like with a great example of Iron Maiden's debut album. I do love a lot of that record, but I'm still surprised that some early albums in production do get a bit of flack, like with Iron Maiden's debut, but I think productions from that album and also with this album is what makes it a very good charm. And for Metallica, they are off with something very strong to behold, and they would later on improve and build and explore later on across their career. Overall, Kill 'Em All by Metallica is one of my favourites, one of my favourite metal debuts, but I will say this is not a classic record as many people say that it is. However, with that being said, I think Kill 'Em All has, as I said, aged as tremendously as the whole album is still monumental and as a newer form of specialty in the 80s, just like with the new wave of British heavy metal later on. I'm going to give Kill 'Em All by Metallica a 9 out of 10. Let me know what you guys think of this album in the comments down below. Is this your favourite Metallica album or one of your favourites? And we also got to give credit to Dave Mustaine. Even though that he was fired from his behaviour and toxic relationship with him and the rest of the band, but he definitely boosted a newer source for Metallica at the time that would later on become something as remaining and consistent for the rest of the later writing and progressiveness which the band would continue to deliver to this very day. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll keep you guys posted for more videos in the near future.